So just want to do a quick thing about the Richard Bergen stuff today. I've learned the hard way that just tweeting about this kind of stuff is not necessarily a good idea. We'll see if this is any better. So obviously he has nothing to resign over. This is over a video from 2014 in which he said Zionism was an enemy of peace. And then he was picked up over these comments a few years later and denied that he said them. I mean, to be honest, when people say, oh, he's lying, people, who speak at numerous meetings and rallies aren't necessarily going to remember half a decade later what they said at each of them years later. But on the actual substance of what was said, now obviously we have to distinguish between Zionism, which is a political ideology and a political movement, and people who are Jewish, people who adhere to the Jewish religion, but also have a sense of Jewish cultural identity as well. And to be anti-Zionist or non-Zionist is not anti-Semitic. But I suppose what people like myself and on the left, I think, have learned is that the term Zionist and Zionism is too much of a catch-all term in the sense that most Jewish people on earth do support the existence of a state of Israel. So, for example, there's a big difference between those who believe in the forcible annexation of all Palestinian land and the creation of a greater Israel, and those who believe in an independent Palestinian state based on pre-1967 borders, who are part of the besieged but courageous Israeli peace movement. So there's a difference between Likud, on the one hand, the party of Benjamin Netanyahu, a racist party, as part of a very racist government, and Meretz, who are on the left and believe in a genuine peace. Now, they would both be called Zionists, but it's meaningless just to conflate them as the same thing, because obviously there's a complete huge difference, and I wouldn't say Meretz is an enemy of peace. And I think a lot of people on the left over the last few years, particularly given what's happened particularly the last 4 years, have come to understand the sensitivity of how you speak about these things. Because otherwise there's this sense of, those who believe, in genuine peace, who hate Benjamin Netanyahu, but call themselves Zionists, they're going, oh, hold on a minute, you're saying, what, I'm an enemy of peace? And obviously we have to build those bridges. I would distinguish between someone like people in Europe and the United States and Palestinians. Palestinians, in terms of talking about Zionism and Zionists, well, they're talking about their lived experience of living under occupation. So I don't think that applies in the same way. But I personally have very much come to understand that it's not helpful to just bandy around Zionist and Zionism, that they lack precision as terms, which therefore can cause hurt and distress, and they can also be misused. So what I would always now talk about is supporters of the Israeli occupation, supporters of of a brutal and illegal occupation, incidentally, of the Israeli government and so on. And they are enemies of peace, those people, those apologists for the occupation and so on. And I also would note that there are those historically who are part of, I would say, anti-Semitic trends, who are staunchly repressive Israeli governments and acts of occupation and so on. Richard Nixon was taped saying terrible anti-Semitic things that was a staunch supporter of the state of Israel. Donald Trump, again, somebody who has used anti-Semitic language, not least saying to American Jews that Benjamin Netanyahu was their prime minister. No, he's not. They're American citizens. And that broader alt-right movement which talk in anti-Semitic phraseology and many of the supporters of the Trump movement. So that's what I just wanted to say. I just think, look, would Richard Bergen have remembered necessarily what he said several years ago? I just don't buy it. I don't really remember a lot of things I said at various rallies and meetings half a decade ago, just to be honest. And I think a lot of people on the left have come to understand through dialogue how you use certain terms and language with precision. And I think when he says he just wouldn't use those terms now, personally, I just buy it. That's just my 2 cents. That's just what I think. I think it's an interesting discussion. But, you know, it's important that we listen to Jewish people who, obviously, at a time of rising anti-Semitism across the Western world, the rise of anti-Semitic incidents, they want us to show sympathy and solidarity, and in no way should that be on a collision with our passionate and ardent support for an independent and free Palestine, free of Israeli occupation. And we have to obviously disentangle those two things, and there is no contradiction. They're both the same things: opposing oppression and bigotry and supporting justice and freedom for all.